Sadly now, you make me think I was beautiful. Sadly now, you make me think I was beautiful.
People ask me what makes us unique. What is unique is we are riders as well. Two of the owners at Freestyle Ingenuity ride and compete all over the nation. We test this stuff almost on a daily basis, and all the top riders in the country are currently using our equipment, and we get feedback from them and we make the adjustments, and we're constantly improving this stuff. So that's what makes us unique. Hi, my name is Tim Barnes. I'm the founder and CEO of Freestyle Ingenuity. We specialize in sport bike safety components. There's several things that we look for when we build a cage. First of all, we want to protect the motorcycle. It can't interfere with the rider. It has to deflect in order to transfer the load when the bike hits the ground. And when it flexes, it transfers the load to all four of those contact points, therefore reduces the stress on the frame of the motorcycle. These are our engine cage loops. You can see the wall thickness. These are 156 thousandths wall chromoly steel. Chromoly tubing is used because it has great memory. When you push it or you bend it, it returns back to its original shape much better than any other metal that we could use. The engine protection cage has the chromoly loop. To ensure that every one of them is the same, they are made on a CNC bender so that every one of them is correct, and when they come off that bender, they are checked by another machine for accuracy. When the parts come back from the CNC bender, they're placed on a jig, the tabs are welded on, and then the side struts are 100% check fitted for accuracy. Then everything goes to the powder coater. Once we get parts back from powder coating, then they are assembled in a kit and shipped out to the customer. Currently, Freestyle Ingenuity is building handlebar risers for Street Fighter setup, extended frame sliders with replaceable Delron tips, 12 o'clock bar with replaceable skid plates that are all form-fitting to the subframe of the motorcycle, press-fit bar ends, and we also make swing arm spools for the swing arms. If you go to www.freestyleingenuity.com, you can find a list of dealers as well as all the products that we're carrying and what's coming out.
The most important part of anything is the brains behind the operation. You always got to protect your head. You're not going to see us riding around with no helmet. We've done it before. In fact, I've crashed with no helmet on. I put myself in the hospital for a week and definitely lost a lot of brain cells. I learned my lesson the hard way. I don't want anybody else to. Let's talk about my helmet for a second. This thing's fully custom. When it comes to custom, that's us. This helmet from Custom Creations, one of my personal favorites, the one that I've been running this season. It's working out really well for me. It's been through a couple of crashes and been repaired, and you can't even really tell. The bottom line is, Chris does the job. He gets it done, and he lets you know who's riding it. When it comes to body work, we do it too. You want custom cuts, you want custom paint, Custom Creations is the guy you got to go see. Call Chris.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to see may or may not split your wig, but pay attention, it's very important. We decided to use a totally stock R6 for this because it's a very popular bike and it's also a smaller engine bike. A lot of people like to think that we need 1 liter size bikes, you know, thousands, 900s, stuff like that. We don't need those kind of bikes to do what we're doing. So we're taking a totally stock R6 and we're showing you what the deal is.
The only thing different about this bike over stock is the brake fluid and the tire pressure. We dropped the tire pressure to approximately 20 PSI. We're going to be doing that for the basic 12. Once we get into taking our hands off and going really slow, we're going to drop it even more to approximately 12 pounds.
When we take a bike and we're about to stunt it, we might not make some serious changes, but one thing we definitely like to do, since we're doing advanced wheelies, we're going to be hard on the brake. We're going to be rocking it, and like the brake is our savior. This right here is what's going to save our lives. So we want to make sure that the brake fluid isn't going to boil. We're going to save you probably, I don't know, 2.5 years worth of BS you're going to have to go through and sum it up in about 5 minutes here. Here's how it goes. You never want to leave the stock brake fluid in your lines. Why? Because stock brake fluid usually has a lower boiling point and it boils faster. All right, so you're riding your brake all day, doing circle wheelies, doing whatever, and you come to find out all of a sudden your pedal's getting spongy, it's not really working, you're standing on it and nothing's happening. Here's the reason why. Too much friction in the back, the rotor's glowing red, it's boiling your fluid, next thing you know you got no pedal. Here's how you fix that problem. You go and you search, and we've checked everywhere, and we came up with this brake fluid right here. This is the Super Dot 4. Flip your brake fluid over in the back, check the boiling point. This has got a 500-degree boiling point. This is the best stuff we've ever seen. We've seen nothing beat this. We use it in the front, the back, we use it everywhere. But for this segment, the back's where we want it. So first of all, you bleed your fluid, you get the good fluid in there, you got that problem fixed. Then, you're over there, you're doing the same thing, and you're wondering how come your brake pedal doesn't have the same feel. Well, that's because you overheated your pads, all right? And before you're in there working on it and throwing wrenches all over the place, let me just save you another couple of years of aggravation. You get the right pads the first time and you'll be good. You want to get harder pads like a race compound, something sintered, maybe some double H's. You want to get some ceramic, whatever you got, the harder pad, the better. For the back, that's the idea. It works good. Here's a problem we do run into. Sometimes we get a brake pad that's a little bit too hard. It'll grab exactly like we want, but it gets so hot and it grabs so tight that your rotor gets warm. It'll crack your rotor. I don't know. We haven't fixed that problem yet, but I'm just going to tell you what you're up against.
Let's talk about brake pedal positioning. We have ours set approximately 1 inch under our foot peg. The reason that we don't have them any higher than that is because we don't want to be riding the brakes anymore than we have to. When we're done riding the 12, we want the brakes to cool off, and resting our foot on the pedal is just going to keep it activated and create more heat. Another reason that we adjust the brake pedal height is for comfort when we're in a wheelie. We don't want to have our foot in an uncomfortable position.
Let's talk about oil for a second. I like to run a quart extra on my bike when it comes to doing a lot of wheelies, and here's the reason why. When your bike's up in a position like this, your oil pickup might be up towards the front and it's not sucking any oil. If it's in the back, you're okay, but not many people know that. So it's pretty safe to run an extra quart of oil when you're in there, especially if you're going to be at mid to decent RPMs. If you're running super high RPMs all the time, you might want to move your oil pickup to the back of the bike.
Throughout this entire video series, we're going to let you in on a couple tips, a couple secrets, things that we've been taught by the masters, the pros. Things such as the long stoppie, okay? This technique is known as the long stoppie. This is a 12 o'clock wheelie.
Not only can these things defend you on your bike, but these are things taught to us by two of the masters we learned from, Master Cylinder and Master Link. They taught us things like street defense and how to defend yourself on the streets.
Hey, Kyle, let's say somebody's talking about your wheelies is garbage. Your wheelies is garbage. What's your first move? The long stoppie, okay?
Well, you can come back to them with the ever-dominating 12 o'clock. Clearly, the master of all self-defense mechanisms. And we're going to show you how to do it right now.
R6, Kyle Woods, 12 o'clock wheelie position equals.
Whoa! The cliffhanger saved me!
Okay, listen, we have the bike in a 12 o'clock wheelie position. This is approximately what it's going to look like and what it's going to feel like when you're maintaining a set speed in a wheelie. For the most part, the bike's going to be in this position when we're in a set speed. We're going to be doing approximately 25 to 30 miles per hour. Kyle and I are going to talk about what it feels like up here, what to do, what not to do. Kyle?
Learning the slow wheelies, the 12 o'clocks, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people want to learn it. That's what it's all about. Because here's the real deal, okay? In the last tape, you learned how to do the stand-ups. You learn how to clutch it up. You're standing there. You get on the seat. You're blazing down the highway. You're blazing down A1A, Beachfront Avenue. You're looking at the girls are screaming. They're showing you stuff that I can't talk about on this film. Things are getting out of control. Here's the problem. You're not getting their phone number. You're not going to actually hook up with them. Why? Because you're going way too fast. Now, if we take the whole equation, slow it down, the slow wheelie, the 12 o'clock, all of a sudden, they catch up with you at the next light, you get your phone number, you're walking around with this hot girl like this, and you're the man, and it's all because you're our sizzle. So let's talk about how to do it.
All right, we're going to talk about the trials and the tribulations of the 12 o'clock wheelie. Me personally, it took me a good portion of an entire summer to learn this trick. I didn't have the luxury of a teacher or anybody to give me tips and tricks. Yeah, okay. Kyle, let's talk about our experiences learning the 12 o'clock wheelie.
Ready for this? Obviously, by now, you've seen the first video. You've learned about throttle control, Matt Gorka's explanation, you know, the whole 9 yards. That's very important for this trick that we're about to talk about. The leading cause of 12 o'clock crashes is lack of throttle control. The more choppy you are with the throttle, the more side-to-side movement your bike's going to get. You're actually going to control the bike with your brake. Tell them a little about that, Todd.
Okay. A lot of guys focus on scraping first before riding a slow wheelie. They focus on bringing the bike back, scraping the tail. But here's what happens. The bike will come back. We'll panic in a situation where the bike lets off, we'll hit the tail, we'll let off the brake, we'll let off the gas at the same time. It usually results in a crash. It's exactly the opposite of what we want to do learning the 12 o'clock wheelie.
Basically, you want consistency. Number one, you're up in the 12, like when you start getting up in the 12, you're bringing the bike a lot higher than you are supposed to. And your brain, your body's going, this is bad, I'm going to end up in the hospital, I don't know why I'm doing this. The reality of the situation is you got to overcome your normal fears, you got to pass your normal mental balance point, and you got to get to the 12 o'clock balance point. So rule number one, don't panic. You got to relax. You're always in control of your bike. You tell your bike what to do. Your bike doesn't tell you what to do.
All right, Kyle's up in a 12 o'clock wheelie position. He's going to go over where he wants to be sitting on the seat, his body manipulation, and everything else. So Kyle, let's talk about what we're doing right now.
While I'm in the wheelie, I like to be like in the middle of my seat. I'm not really all the way up at the front. I'm kind of in the middle, and actually sometimes I'm even off the seat a little bit. The reason why is in the 12 o'clock, there's no gyro effect to hold you up. You're actually using a lot of your body weight, and you're kind of throwing the bike around. It's like a real fast twitch situation. We're going to show you some other clips where it's from behind right now, but basically I like to be in the middle. I like to relax. I got full control of my body weight, swinging it side to side. It's a lot like steering the regular wheelie, but it's a lot faster. Your body's got to move quicker because the bike wants to fall over by itself. You need to anticipate which way it's going to fall and then lean the other side. You clutch the bike up, you get at the balance point, you're at the spot, you're holding it. Okay, once I get to the spot I like, I'm steady on the gas. I try to move the gas as little as possible. The more chop I have in the gas, the more side-to-side movement the bike's going to have. Here's how I control my wheelie. I'm using the brake. I'm constantly on the brake just a little bit. I'm not trying to kill it and snap the peg clean off. I'm just on it a little bit of pressure, and I'm working it back and forth, almost tapping it a little bit. What I want to do is I'm giving it gas. If I was to let off the bike, I give it enough gas to where the bike would want to come back and flip. Now, how I counter that is by giving it just a little bit of brake, and I'm holding it just past the balance point, so when I give it a little more brake, I come back down. And I try not to pass the normal balance point. If I do pass the balance point, now I have to throttle back in to get it there. The problem is when you throttle it back in, now you're susceptible to getting really wobbly. So you want to stay just behind the balance point, nice cruise and steady speed. It's something you're going to pick up in a little bit. Situation is this. You get your wheelie, you pick it up, you hold it, you're at where you want to be, the balance point you learned in the last video. Well, now you stay there, you hold it. Even if you're giving it a little too much gas, I hold it anyway, right? And I'm locked in position. Now I use my brake to bring me up and down. The more I push on my brake, the more the bike's going to come down. When I let off, the bike's going to throttle itself back up. That's the basics of how you do this. You work the brake. You're constantly a little bit on the brake. The idea is to be off the brake as much as possible, but I'm always kind of just a hair on the brake, and sometimes more, sometimes more, sometimes more. Here's how I do my 12 o'clock. I hold my throttle steady. I don't ever move my throttle. Once I get up, I manipulate my wheelie right. I'm in my right position. All I use is the brake to hold me steady. I might be giving a little bit too much gas, but it's the brake that gives it all the control. The more you push down, the more the bike's going to come down. When you let up, the bike's going to throttle itself back into position, and it's that simple. It's a lot smoother when you use the brake like this. It's the more I chop the throttle, the more wobbly the bike gets. I don't want that at all. I like to be nice and smooth with the brake, just kind of ride and apply a little pressure, Star date 1998. We have recently discovered the use of the rear brake. Matt, tell us.
All right, the back brake now is a totally new concept. Before learning the 12 o'clock wheelie, we didn't need it. We could have taken it clean off the bike and not missed it at all. But we're going to be utilizing it in the advanced wheelie video. Every trick that we learn from here on out, we're going to utilize brake control and throttle control. But if I was to learn all over again, I don't think I'd use something as expensive and as intimidating as a $10,000 piece of machinery.
That's funny you should ask. I bought myself a 400EX, and that's what I did most of my stuff with in the learning stages. I'd ride my wheelies. I already had throttle control all set. Sometimes I'd set it down and almost fall over the bars. Well, I'm incorporating throttle control. I learned my brake control. The one cool thing is I didn't have to worry about balance.
Right. On a four-wheeler, we take away the side-to-side stability. We take that out of the equation. We're just left with front and back, brake control and throttle control. Plus, if you crash it, it's a lot cheaper, it's not as intimidating, and you're probably going to land on grass. So.
Hopefully you're not on grass for this next move because you're going to waltz yourself into the dealership. You're going to buy yourself an XR50. The reason that might be, it's a kid's bike, but it's not kids play here. We're talking serious stuff. Those bikes look like little bikes, they handle like big bikes. Here's the thing, you got your throttle control fixed, now you learn your brake control, you're going to mix that with side-to-side bike balance. When you learn the 12 o'clock on that, crash that, it's $1,000. Cash that, it's 10 grand. Catch that? Jimmy Bob's having a blast on this thing, and you can too.
This is fun as hell. How much would I expect to pay? Is this cheap?
It's cheap.
How cheap?
Cheap as hell.
How?
For only $49.95.
Ooh, did you hear that? 3 installments of $127.50 gets you the wheelie simulator today.
And if you act now, we'll throw in 2 tie-down straps and a rope.
Oh, start taping, because Daddy's scraping.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Doesn't get any better than this, Willie. So much. The 12 o'clock simulator works exactly like the regular 12 o'clock. And basically, here's how it works. The bike's always needing to be balanced because it never wants to stay up by itself. It's like balancing anything, a unicycle, pogo stick, whatever you got. And basically, what you want to do is, let's say the bike dips one way, you need to lean your body the other way to counter it because you always need the same amount of weight on the bike. Whoa, sometimes it gets way out of hand like that. But you're constantly working it. After a while, you get used to it, and it's to the point where it looks like you're barely working it. And you're chilling just like this. But the reality of the situation is you're just getting so good that instead of like drastic movements, you can feel them almost before they happen, so you don't need to work it. You don't need to deal with it as much. And you get it right back to smooth. But if you notice, I'm still constantly moving, just not as much as I used to be.
I'm going to push Kyle to the left and then to the right and show you exactly what he's got to do in order to get the bike back into position once it gets unsettled underneath him. Pay attention to his hips, his legs. He's going to drop his legs out. He might put his shoulder over one way more than the next, and a little bit of bar manipulation. So I'm going to come to the left and to the right and watch how Kyle adjusts himself.
So basically, he pushed me left. I got to counteract it by leaning the other way. And keep in mind, it's not something that happens right away. You got to set up for it. And you got to get back into it. You got to move the bike underneath you. It's not like necessarily, the bike's not just going to come right back. My leg sometimes sticks out, sometimes my shoulder. I'm pushing on the bars as much as I am turning and leaning. It's a lot of pretty much every muscle you have in your body, because what you're doing is you're anticipating the bike's next move, and you got to counter the bike. I'm here at the Matt Gorka School of 12 O'Clocks, and I'm over here and I want to learn 12 o'clock. So, all right, I got my R6, I'm ready to rock. So I clutch it up, okay, and I already know how to throttle it up and use the clutch. I learned that in the first video, but now I'm ready to rock and roll, and boom, I clutch it up with my 12, all right? I'm gonna panic here because this thing's coming up really high. Now what do? Do I panic and chop the throttle, or do I hit the brake? How do I do this?
The last thing that you want to do is panic. You got to anticipate that the bike's going to be straight up and down, and it's going to be for the most part weightless. We've talked about it. You need to anticipate it. You can't panic. The bottom line is you need to maintain perfect throttle control and perfect brake control. There's a right time and a wrong time to apply your brake. You don't want to be on your brake as you're clutching it up. It's almost like you want to clutch the bike up, and as it's coming up, smoothly apply the brake and apply a little bit more brake pressure to catch the bike so it can stay in that position. You don't want any abrupt movement. You don't want to clutch it up with no brake and just cram on the brake when you think the bike's in the perfect position. That's going to translate in the bike slamming back down. You want to be real smooth on the brake. As it's coming up, you want to apply enough brake to compensate for your throttle and the angle.
So Matt, I learned a lot about the balance point and where it is and what it feels like from the first video with my sit-down wheelies. So what you're saying is I got to quickly clutch it up to that point. I'm already comfortable with that point, so I got to clutch it up to that point, and that's when I start using the brake?
In the first video, we talked about clutching it up and bringing it back to a position of balance. Now, what we're going to do is clutch it up instantly to the balance point. Once it's at the balance point, we're going to come back a little bit from the balance point, and that's where our 12 o'clock wheelie is ridden. In this advanced wheelie video, for the most part, the brake is going to give you more control than the throttle. And a lot of the situations we'll actually lock the throttle and all the control is done with the brake.
So I understand the theory on throttle. You can always, throttle into things and you get a little bit more power. And I understand brake, you hit the brake and it slows you down or stops you. So what you're saying now is you need to stay just behind the balance point so you can work the brake a little bit. And obviously not too hard or it'll bring you past the balance point and you're going to drop the bike, right?
Correct.
I'm about to jump on my bike and go try this. So do me a favor and tell me what I'm going to be feeling and what I'm going to be thinking about while I'm up there.
A compound bow is very similar to what's going on here, the feel of it. There's a lot of resistance, and once it gets back to a certain point, it just lets off. You got to get past that initial fear. The bike letting off is going to trigger a survival reaction and tell you you're in a position you don't want to be in. Well, you're going to learn later on that that's exactly where you want to be in a 12 o'clock wheelie. You have to anticipate that. You have to have faith. You have to trust us in this situation that that's exactly where you're going to be, and you got to learn to get comfortable with it. Here's a situation where Kyle doesn't snap it up into position instantly. Notice that the truck speed doesn't change, but watch where Kyle's position in relation to the truck does. Bike comes up, he's going forward a little bit, the bike comes up a little bit higher, he sheds some speed, and there he is in the position. Now he's locked in, balancing the bike, using the back brake. All right, check this out. Kyle snaps the bike up, and he's in a position right there instantaneously. We're in the truck tracking right next to him. Notice that he didn't gain any speed, and he's over-exaggerating the use of the back brake there just to show you the importance. He clutches it up. He gets right back into position, but the bike's going to move around on him a little bit. Once he's got his speed set, now he's got to maintain a direction going straight. The road's cambered a little bit. Notice how he's off the seat, adjusting side to side. He's pivoting the bike underneath him, not so much as leaning off the bike. Notice for the most part, Kyle's body position remains upright, and he's going to move the bike underneath him.
Here's where throttle control comes in because I'm moving all over the bike. I'm changing my body weight, I'm changing my direction. I need to keep the throttle exactly the same. I use my body to balance me and steer me, and I need to keep my foot exactly still working the brake, keeping me up. So this is where it really gets tough. You got to use all your factors at the same time.
I got really good at maintaining a smooth wheelie, but once I started doing the 12 o'clocks, I noticed that I was kind of all over the place, and I thought it's something I really needed to correct, but the longer that I ride, the more I realize that the 12 o'clock wheelie, the slower you go, you're going to be moving around, so you need to be able to manipulate the bike underneath you. You're using a lot of brake. There's just a lot of movement going on in this wheelie, more so than any other wheelie.
It becomes more of a balancing game than it does anything else. Balancing the bike is a little different story. You might want to put weight on one side or the other, but it's like a quick shift of the weight, just enough to balance the bike and keep it straight. A steer is like put your weight there and keep it there. But a balance is like put it there just for a second, take it back, and keep shifting your weight. Now, if you pay attention, I keep my geometry straight. Like I might throw my butt off the one side, my head off the other, and I'm constantly doing that sort of thing. If I throw my body weight all to one side, that steers me that way. If I'm just balancing it, I'll throw my butt to the left, my head to the right, or vice versa. At Gorka, School of Speed Control. Let's talk about speeds, Matt. When you're doing a 12 o'clock, what speed do you like to be at? What's the ideal speed for, say, a stock bike?
For a stock bike, stock gearing, for the most part, you're going to be at 35 to 40 miles per hour. I don't want to be coming back from a speed that's greater than that. I don't want to clutch my bike up at 40 miles an hour, get it up to 70, and pull it back down to 45. What I want to do is clutch it up at around 15 and get myself settled in a position where I'm at around 35 to 40 miles per hour.
One thing I noticed from the first video was, say if I was doing like 35 like you said and I clutched it up, it'd be about 25 miles an hour I'd usually gain in clutching it up. So you're saying compensate for that by trying to clutch it up at a lot lower speed?
Notice that when we clutch up at 12, we bring it up almost instantly. We're not really powering the bike up. We're bringing it back to position and catching it with the back brake. Once it gets up to about 45 degrees, that's when we're applying the back brake, and it can almost be done in a 15-foot area. So it's done rather quickly.
The reason why you bring it up fast is because you want to be able to, first of all, have it up as slow as possible, and second of all, be able to have plenty of RPMs in case there's a mistake where you got to kind of set the front end down and pick it back up, throttle into it or something. As it's coming up, I'm letting off more, and at this point, I'm a lot better at judging how much throttle to give in a wheelie. I get to that balance point, I hold the throttle where it needs to be, and I work the brake. So as it comes up, it hits the balance point, I'm letting off on the gas, while I'm releasing some of the gas as I'm pushing on the brake. So I get to a happy medium, my arm stays locked, and from then on, I'm just keeping it just behind the balance point with my brake foot only.
Going very slow, the bike's going to translate to side movements. Anytime that you're between 15 and 45 miles an hour, you're going to be, for the most part, smooth. Anything over 45 miles an hour, the bike's going to be too upright and you're going to be going too fast, and you might get a caster effect, much like you get on a shopping cart. When we say faster speeds, everything's done in first gear. All my 12 o'clock wheelies are done in first gear, The thing is when you're up at 45, 50 miles an hour in a 12, you're riding real hard on the brake to keep it steady, and there's a good chance of brake fade.
Brake fade's very important. You don't want to catch brake fade when you're going 40, 50 miles an hour. So like we said before, the first thing you're going to want to do is, number one, change your brake fluid. And if that's not doing it for you, you're definitely going to have to get on a set of new pads. There's two ways to get your bike where you want it. It's either you clutch it up, you don't give it enough gas, and you throttle into your position of comfortability, or you can clutch it up as hard as you can and use the brake to bring you back. In this particular situation, the truck's right in front of me. I only had 15 feet to play with. If I would have clutched it up not enough and had to throttle into it, I'd have smashed myself into the back of the truck. So what I had to do is give it a little bit too much gas and rely on my brake. I flipped myself past the point, and I used my brake to bring me right there, so I stayed at the same speed as the truck.
Okay, the main objective is you want to be off the brake and off the throttle as much as possible, but you're always going to be on your brake and you're always going to be using your throttle. You don't want to have the throttle crammed to the throttle stop, and you don't want to have your brake pedal crammed to the bottom of the brake travel. So the thing is that once you get back into position, you want to be as smooth as possible, not to work the brake any more than you have to, and not give it any more gas than you have to.
It's absolutely necessary to be able to control a 12 o'clock wheelie before attempting to scrape. Scraping before you know how to do a 12 o'clock wheelie typically results in a crash. Here's a natural reaction when trying to scrape for the first time before we have the 12 down solid. We'll clutch the bike up, forgetting about the 12 altogether and focusing mainly on the scrape itself. The bike will pass back to an unfamiliar height, we'll panic, let off the throttle, let off the brakes, same time, and the rest is left to the imagination. The tail's going to touch, probably the pipe first, and it's going to throw us to the right side and usually result in a crash. So that's why we absolutely need to be comfortable doing the 12 before attempting to scrape. Alright, we're going to clutch the bike up and ride our 12 smooth. We're rock steady, we don't have any side-to-side movement. Now we're going to ease off the brakes slightly to allow the bike to come back smooth until the tail makes light contact with the ground. As soon as the tail touches, ease back into the brake to a normal 12 position and ride out smooth. We don't want to cram the brake on and shut the throttle off as the tail touches because it throws the bike to whichever side our body weight is on, and if we're not in perfect position, we're going to go out to that side. Alright, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stick the trick. Focus on the scrape and what happens after the scrape. You have to think a couple steps ahead in this situation. You know you're going to scrape, the bike's going to come back in a position where it's a little bit lighter than normal, the tail stick's going to touch, and you have to be ready for the next two moves because this is the most important aspect of the scrape is riding out of the scrape. It's a lot like a game of pool. You're not going to hit your shot and not set yourself up for the next one, and that's what we're doing here in the scrape.
Thanks for joining us on this session of Sprocket Talk. My name's Kyle Woods, and I'm here to show you what goes on with these gears, okay? Gear goes a lot farther than your jacket and helmet. This is stock, comes on your bike, and throw it out. The thing is useless, and we don't use them. We go on to companies like Thrust, who make some of the stunt gears that we use. These are called Rebel gears. It's the bigger sprockets we use on our bikes, and we get them at motoheaven.com. Don't be scared to log on and see what they got for your bike. Now here's the deal. Here's the reason why we use them. We get to clutch our bike up at a slower speed and ride it at a slower speed. With a stock bike, stock sprockets, you get about 8-9 miles an hour slowest before you stall. Put these in your bike, you can get it down to like 2, even 1 mile an hour. But where it really saves your life, clutching it up, you're over the bars, you're doing the high chair, you go to scrape, it gives you the engine brake to bring it back down. It increases your torque by about, I think the mathematical equation is 17 divided by 1 times 3 to the third power, something like that. But it's good and it works. motoheaven.com.
In the slow wheelie, this is where you're going to use most of your body for all types of balance. You need to be able to shift your weight. You need to be able to shift the direction of the bike at any given notice. You don't know where it's going to go. The majority of the fact is the bike's trying to fall over one side or the other. You don't know which way it's going to go yet, but you need to be ready for all of it.
Notice that all the movement for the most part is upper body. His legs are in close. He might drop a knee out a little bit to maintain a direction there, but all the input is done using the arms at this point. Well, Kyle's riding a slow wheelie, 1 foot on the back seat. He's not moving his body a whole lot, but he's using his left foot to actually steer the bike. Notice how he positions it underneath his body. He's pivoting it, and that's pretty much what's going on here. The bike is absolutely weightless at this speed.
In the beginning of most of my slow wheelie contests, I used to ride sitting down. But then I came to a point where I realized standing up, even with a foot in the back of the seat, you get a lot more control. You can throw the bike underneath you. When you're going slow, the bike wants to almost do circle wheelies. You know, it wants to lean into circle wheelies by itself. So what you need to do is when it starts to lean, you got to shift it back, kick it back into place. I find with a foot in the seat, that's the easiest way to do it. You can always compensate for side-to-side movement, going back and forth, uneven pavement. There's always ways to manipulate the bike. The one thing you have to worry about when it comes to going slow is the engine stalling out. That's so many times have I tried to get it slower and slower and slower, and I bog the engine down, and you hear the engine going, and you're like, man, this thing's gonna stall out, and next thing you know, you're flying over the handlebars.
Yeah, you notice the big sprockets that we're using anytime that we're going really, really slow. We have a 66.2 setup on this bike. Absolutely important in re-gearing your bike in order to go slow, in order to do a lot of these slow tricks if you're not working with a modern fuel-injected bike. Plus, it just makes everything a whole lot easier.
We're not going to take a whole lot of time in going slow because once you've learned the basic 12, and geared your bike, it's just time in the saddle. It's just being comfortable with your bike and familiar and just putting a lot of practice hours in.
When I go to the tail, if I'm going to drag for a while, most of the time I'll take myself off the seat, so that way I got more upper body movement that I could throw back and forth. Because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to keep the bike in the same line it's going, but if I feel like going left or right, I counterweight it with my body, just sticking myself off the side. It's a lot easier to do with less body movement if you're off the seat.
There are a lot of different factors in dragging straight. The position of your bar on your bike, the angle of the road, and how smoothly you bring it back to the bar. Once it's on the bar, you have to take all these into consideration and compensate accordingly.
One thing you want to remember is, now you see in this clip that I'm leaning off one side and the other, you can kind of steer the bike, kind of. And I say kind of by meaning your bar is flat, it's on the ground, it's scraping, but what you can do is you can put a little more weight on one side, which will put more resistance on that side of the bar and make it kind of steer. You can't lean it. Once you lean it, you take it onto that side of the bar and it's a sharp edge, it'll drag, and next thing you know, you're going to be laying on your side.
Bringing it back to the bar smooth is very important. You don't just want to pound it into the pavement. If you bring it back real abruptly, it's going to translate into the bike. It's going to unsettle everything. That's why you have to be smooth, patient, bringing it back to the bar. Once the bar hits, you pull the clutch in, and for the most part, it's a smooth ride from there on out. Engaging the clutch smoothly is the way to go. You don't want to just let it out, snapping the clutch. That's going to slam you back into the concrete. You want to let it out smooth and ride away in a wheelie if possible.
Everything's about control. Just like throttle control, there's brake control, there's clutch control. It's all the same thing. And then when you get those down, you want to release your gas as you're pulling in the clutch, and at the same time get on your gas as you're letting out of the clutch. You want to get used to that thing, and you got to maintain full control of your bike. Fuel injected bikes are going to have an easier time dragging for distance due to the fact that they can stay running on the tail a lot longer than a carbureted bike. Carbureted bikes, sometimes you get anywhere between 2 to 6 seconds on the bar. But a lot of times if you're going for a longer drag, you're going to be on the bar a lot longer than that. So just keep in mind, sometimes you got to play with the gas, mess around with it a little bit, or even restart your bike on the way back in. The stand-up drag's a little bit easier when it comes to balancing because you're off the bike more and you can move a little more your upper body. As you can see, like sometimes I even use my head. Little things like this make it a lot easier to drag. Sometimes sitting down's a bit harder. Matt, what's the basic idea, just so I can understand what we're going to be talking about for the next couple minutes, what's the basic idea of a coaster wheelie?
A coaster wheelie is riding the back wheel with absolutely no throttle whatsoever. The clutch is pulled in and you're freewheeling and you're controlling the height of your bike using the back brake.
So that's why they call it a coaster. Basically, you're just coasting. You're not using any gas.
Right, hence the name, coaster.
Explain to me in gist what I'm going to do here. Okay, I'm doing a 12 o'clock. I'm fine with that. I noticed that. And then all of a sudden, something crazy happens.
You're going to snap the throttle just a little bit, give it a little blip once you're at a 12 o'clock wheelie position, and as it's coming back, you pull the clutch in, catch the bike, and you're riding the brake. The thing is that you need to be very smooth on the brake. If you're modulating the brake too much, it's going to bring the bike past the balance point, and you're going to have to engage the clutch, throttle it back into position, and that's what we're going to show you in this next clip. We're going to show you the beginning stages of learning how to coast. This trick is a perfect example of stressing the importance of the back brake and how it adjusts your height. There's no throttle here. All the height of the bike is adjusted using the back brake, and that's what a coaster is. Once you're smooth in a 12 o'clock wheelie, once you've been doing it for some time, maybe several months, and you're very confident with the trick and you're confident with the position that your body and bike are in, you bring yourself back into a position a little bit faster than normal. You're actually whipping yourself back into a coaster position. You notice that the bike's smooth, 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 and then you see it just kind of pop right back into position. And it's gonna be done using a blip of the throttle. You're gonna come back and just actually give it a little bit more throttle and catch the bike using the back brake.
So I'm catching it using the back brake, but now, like you said before, if you take away the engine, then you use very little back brake.
Right, so here's what happens. I'm coming back in a 12 o'clock position. This one I'm going to power into because I want to get a little bit of speed. I'm going to power the bike up, almost like I'm riding into a 12 o'clock wheelie position rather quickly. And once it gets back to where I'm close to the 12, I'm going to snap it back and at the same time pull the clutch in. And I'm going to catch it with the back brake. In this next clip, we're going to show you exactly the first steps of learning the coaster. We're going to be riding a 12 and snap it back into position. We're probably going to coast for about 10, 12 feet. The front of the bike's going to come back down, and then we're going to keep doing that a couple more times. This is how we looked learning how to coast. We brought the bike up into 12 o'clock position, brought it back a little bit, pulled the clutch in, used a little bit too much brake, it brings the front end down, and we just keep practicing getting the bike back into position. We're only coasting for the most part 15 to 20 feet here at a time. We're just getting comfortable with getting ourselves back into that position.
Yeah, this one I wasn't going for distance. I'm just going to snap it back and just get the feel of it, you know, and then give it a little too much gas, get back on the gas, bring me back, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth.
He's going to power it up. It's not a total snap into position. He's going to maintain speed, and then once he gets back into that position, pulls the clutch in, and now he's coasting. You notice that when the front of the bike drops down, he engages the clutch, catches it with the gas, and pulls it right back into position. This is a perfect shot. Kyle's going to clutch it up, brings it up, he's still accelerating, boom, brings it right back into the coast position. He's hanging out there. Notice there's very, very little movement of the bike going on.
Let me see that one more time, Matt. If you can look at the geometry, and I'm way higher than you would be normally. That's a normal 12 o'clock, and then that's the coast. That's the beautiful thing about this shot right here. It shows the difference between the two.
Notice how close the pipe is to the ground. A lot of times when we're coasting, it'll actually hit. You want to bring the coast back as smooth as possible because if we pound that pipe into the pavement, it's definitely going to throw us off to the right side. This is something that you want to have perfect brake control and perfect throttle control before even attempting this trick. This is a perfect speed in learning coasters. We're definitely less than 40 miles per hour here. Notice that Kyle clutches the bike up and he probably only gains about 15, 20 miles per hour before he goes into his coast. This is really safe and there's no need to go any faster than this when learning. This is a perfect example on how you want to bring the bike back into a coasting position as soon as possible so you don't gain a whole lot of speed. Notice that Kyle clutched it up here, boom, gets right back into the coast position. He's coasting, the front of the bike drops down, instantly brings it back. He does it in less than a car length there. He gets close to the car, maintains good balance, and does it again. He's doing that in about the distance of the truck bed, so he can do all that within 10 to 15 feet, no problem.
A couple things you want to remember in a coaster. Number one, you got to be smooth, you got to be fluid, not only with your brake, not only with your clutch, not with your throttle, but also with your body movement. You can't be jumping around, you can't be jittery, and you can't move as much as you do in a 12 o'clock. The reason being, because we learned the hard way, if we move around too much, you're up so high, it almost works as a caster, and your bike feels like it wants to flip around.
All right, the no throttle hand, you definitely have to have your idle turned off for this one. You know, it's not a magic trick here. We have our idle set around 3 to 3,500 RPM. The bike, for the most part, is the same position you'd be in a very slow wheelie, close to where you'd be if you were coasting. That's why we want to learn the slow wheelie and we want to learn the coasting before doing the no throttle hand. In order to do this trick, you have to have a lot of brake control and you have to have the other tricks down pat before moving on to this.
We learned all these tricks and steps for a reason.
Approximately 3,000 RPM is good for this trick. We learned all the tricks in sequence up to this point for a reason. We want to be able to clutch our wheelie up instantly, get ourselves back into 12 o'clock position instantly. We have our idle set, and we're using nothing but brake control on this. Once we get back to a little bit past the balance point, we're going to be doing much like what we're doing in a coaster as far as brake control, and just a little bit of brake, on and off the brake, on and off the brake to keep us in this position. Because for the most part, well, we're not using any throttle whatsoever as far as our wrist is concerned. We have our idle set to 3,000, 3,500 RPM. We're using nothing but the brake. So once we're back in that position, once again, just like getting us back into a coasting position, we need to blip the throttle a little bit, take us back a little bit further than we normally want to be, and then use the brake to keep us modulated in the spot where we're going to be balanced out here.
So what you're saying is I'm using the brake in this case a lot like I'm be doing in a coaster?
Absolutely. And once again, you're going to use a little blip of the throttle to get you back in that position. The reason you don't want to roll on the throttle when doing this trick so much is because you don't want to gain too much speed. You don't want to have to fight the speed off because your idle is only set at 3,000 RPM. It might not be enough to bring you back into position. So
sometimes if you don't put your idle high enough, or in some cases if you overbrake your idle, in this case Mac Gorka is showing you right now how he sometimes will grab the throttle, give it a little bit, a little bit more of a blip, get it back into position, and then keep rolling.
Doing the no throttle hand, we're going to get our bike back into position where we're basically vertical and we're going very slow. We're going to need a different method in order to get the bike straight underneath us. It's a lot of pivoting the bike underneath us and shuffling it back into position. This same concept is going to be used when taking our hands off the bike and actually getting us turned into our circle wheelie.
I clutch my wheelie up. Once my wheelie's smooth, I'm balanced, I'm feeling good, I slide all the way back into the seat. That way I can, rest on my back. I take my hands off and I'm hugging the tank with my knees, and I kind of shift and throw the bike underneath me with my lower body.
If you go a couple miles an hour faster than you would doing a no throttle hand, you'll actually be able to maintain a smoother wheelie. Check this out, Kyle's on an uneven street. We chose to do this on a road. We don't ride on the streets, but this is the most uneven surface that we had closest to us. Kyle clutches the bike up. Watch how much he leans off the bike, but he's holding himself on the bike with his knees here. He's leaning over, comfortable.
I'm totally off to one side, and you got to be able to switch back and forth. And I'm obviously going off to the right. I want to catch that, so I'm going to lean all the way off to the left and compensate for the crown of the road and things like that. It took a little while to get used to it, but now it's no big deal.
Doing a stand-up no-hander, it's a little bit different. I'm going to use my brake foot to control my movement to the right. I'm going to press a little bit more on my foot to bring me over to the right. And my right knee is actually on the side of my tank, and I'll push on my tank to move me to the left. Kyle, let's talk about the ape hanger a little bit.
Okay.
I've seen it called different things. I've seen it tried different ways, but you invented it, you named it, and you do it better than anybody else out there. Let's talk about the secrets and the tricks involved in it.
The ape hanger is a cool trick. It kind of actually does it for you, to tell you the truth. The main part of the ape hanger, believe it or not, is the drag. You have to develop the drag, master the drag, make sure you're good at the drag first. When you're confident in your drag, all you're doing now is you're going from your sit down to actually jumping off your bike. And once your feet touch the ground, since your momentum's going forward, it's going to pull you off the bike and it's going to force you to drag yourself behind you. First things first, you got to be dragging smooth. If you're out of control, don't jump off into the ape hanger. It's going to get 10 times worse. What you want to do is you're in control, looking good. You hop off the back, you set your feet down almost like you're going to stand behind it, but your momentum's going to pull you into the ape hanger position.
I've seen this done so many different ways, but you look the most comfortable on your bike. I noticed that you're fully extended during this trick. Does that actually help in the stability of the trick?
Definitely. There's a couple different little secrets to it. Number one, you want to get your hand in a position to where when your body's straight, you're not going to be gassing it, you're not going to be letting off on the throttle, because I am technically on the gas when I'm doing this trick. There's a couple things you want to watch out for. Number one, you want to make sure your arm's in a position to where if you are straight out, you're not going to be gassing it or letting off in the gas. You'll be giving it the same amount of gas you were when you were dragging. Number two, when you lock yourself out or when you allow yourself to extend, that helps when you want to steer it, because what you can do is you can kind of put more weight on one side or maybe put a little bit more force on your leg. It's hard to explain, but you'll understand when you're doing it. You put more force on one leg as opposed to the other, and you can still steer the bike almost a little bit better than you would if you were normally dragging. The ape hanger is something you want to try to do at a slower speed, preferably lower first gear. Not necessarily something third or fourth gear on the highway you'd ever want to try, for that matter.
Not only is the ape hanger a wonderful crowd pleaser, but a proven cure to athlete's foot when done without shoes.
You're holding onto the handlebars like you would normally. You're on the bar, you're almost weightless. You pick your feet up. Now, the one you really have to worry about is the clutch side. You want to put your foot on the clutch perch and not on the clutch lever. You don't want to pull the clutch in. You want to have it hold onto the clutch perch. That's just about the only one you have to worry about. Your other foot's going to actually go on the front brake, and you don't care about that because that's, up in the air. It's not doing anything anyway. It's another little secret I like to do when I'm dragging. We talked earlier in the ape hanger about when I was on the bar, I'd kind of give it a little bit of gas, let on the clutch and give it gas. With the rear wheel spinning, it gives you forward momentum, all right, and that's what keeps you a little bit straighter. You want that same theory for the cliffhanger. Now, if you're not on the controls, how do you do that? You raise the idle a little bit, all right? So you go into your 12 o'clock, the idle's a little bit high no matter what, you're overpowering it with the brake, you back onto the bar, you pull your clutch to make sure it's smooth. Once it is smooth, you let out on the clutch, on the gas a little bit just to ease into your accelerated idle. Then you got to make sure you're dragging smooth, hang your feet up, and dangle behind the bike. The only problem is it's totally out of control. As long as it's dragging straight, I'll start coming out as I feel like, starting to chug and it's about to stall out. I grab the bars real quickly. Right when I grab the bars, this is what I do at the same time. I hit the brake, I pull the clutch, and I let off the gas. At the same time, I hit the starter button. While the thing's coming down, I'm actually trying to restart my bike. And I hear it spin over. Once it catches, I let off the clutch, and I give it gas, and sometimes I can catch it and keep my wheelie.
If you understand all that ramble in one take, Kyle clearly hit the rev limiter of the jaw right there. You might want to rewatch this segment a few times.
The high chair scrape's a very fun, very dangerous, also very exciting trick. Pay attention to this next clip and we'll talk you through it. You're in your high chair, you're doing fine, you're at the balance point. You bring it back a little bit farther, okay? You hit the bar, you pull the clutch in, you let off the gas. You're sliding. If it starts to get out of control, you need to let go of the clutch. Letting out of the clutch is what's going to bring you back. You don't want to give it gas until you've already hit the balance point on your way back down. Then you initiate the gas to ease yourself down.
This is the moment we've been waiting for. The circles, the trick, the be-all, end-all. We're ready for this trick. We've learned everything else up to this point. We struggled learning the 12 o'clock wheelie. We spent time, months and months and months getting that down. Everything else just seemed to fall into place after we got to 12, after we understood the basis of throttle control and brake control. We got the coasting. We got the going slow. We got the drags. We got the scrapes. Now this is the trick that's left, the circle wheelie. It's time for our frustrations to start all over again. I call the circle wheelie the money trick because to learn it without a crash cage or proper instruction usually results in paying for a lot of spare parts. Alright, this is going to be a lot for people to understand on a first take. You're probably going to have to watch this over and over again, and I'm going to go through this rather quickly. But the first step in doing circle wheelies is getting the bike settled underneath you at a constant speed. Constant speed is absolutely necessary when turning the bike into the circle. If you come in accelerating or under acceleration, then turning the bike in, you'll probably result in either high-siding you or throwing your body weight to the outside of the circle or off of the center line of the bike. Coming in while decelerating and turning the bike in will usually result in the bike turning approximately 180 degrees and falling to the ground. You usually only get about halfway around in your circle. When you turn or dip the bike in to initiate the circle requires a couple different things from the rider. You must be comfortable riding slow and be able to pivot the bike underneath you, get it back in line under just about any reasonable circumstance. You're going to need to be good at balancing the bike underneath you going slow, and if something happens, you got to be able to get the bike back in line. You need to counter steer into the circle while simultaneously releasing pressure off your brake foot and adding pressure to your left foot, whether it be in the bar or on the rear peg. In this video, we'll be doing all our circles to the left. Favoring the weight on the brake foot while coming into the circle wheelie will usually result in difficulty being able to turn the bike in. The bike will generally veer right, and then an abrupt turn into the left will be necessary to initiate the wheelie. This will cause your body to swing wide, either to the right or high side us off the bike or put us in a bad position throughout the circle wheelie. Once the bike is properly turned in, it will naturally turn about 90 to 100 degrees on its own. At this point, our body position should be slightly out of the center or off to the right of the bike. Our left hand is at arm's length to the left of us, and our right hand is somewhere in front of us around our left pec area. The bars are cocked or counter-steered with the front wheel pointed somewhat towards us. While the bike is being turned in, its natural reaction will be to fall over into the turn. We prevent this by doing two different things. We want to be accelerating slightly at this point to keep the front wheel up. And two, pivot the bike back center line underneath us. See, accelerating or gassing it can be done a couple of different ways. We can either, one, raise the idle to approximately 3,000 to 4,000 RPM and do the circles riding the rear brake, releasing pedal pressure slightly to cause slight acceleration up in the wheelie. Or two, remain constant and smooth on the throttle and use slight blips of the throttle to get us back into position. It's not a whole lot of throttle, but it's just a little bit to get the bike back into position. And two, pivot the bike back into center line underneath us. Method number one, raising the idle, will usually result in a much smoother looking circle wheelie. But there will be times even using this method that we still need a slight whip of the throttle here and there to recover a falling circle wheelie.
When I get into the circle wheelie, I'm steady, I'm not accelerating, I'm not slowing down. I got my foot on the left part of the bar. Notice my foot's in the bar at the outer left position. That's going to help leverage in turning the bike in. I'm going to push on the left handle grip and I'm going to pull on the right. And what that's going to do, once I'm at a steady speed, not when I'm accelerating, not when I'm slowing down, once I'm steady and ready to get into my circle wheelie, I want to dip it in. Well, I dip the bike in, and as it turns, I want to bring it back to me. The key to going around in the circle wheelie is to keep the front end coming back to you. You want it to turn in and then come up, turn in and come up, turn in and come up. And that's going to look a lot like this. I'm going to turn in, accelerate up, okay? And then turn in, accelerate up. And turn in, accelerate up. Turn in, accelerate up. That's an over-exaggerated body movement, but for the most part, I'm doing that in the circle, and it's going to look, for the most part, like this. And you can't really see it, but you'll see a lot of guys moving the bars back and forth, and that's exactly what's going on. They're dipping it in and bringing it back into position, dipping it in, bringing it back in position. Over-exaggerated, when you turn it in, you might be coming kind of slow, and you might dip it in about this much. Well, you want to get your body back into position right after the bike turns in, and that's done by pivoting it underneath you. You want the bike to pivot underneath you. Not so much a body movement pulling it to the outside, but the bike pivoting underneath you. What this is going to do is going to dip the bike in, and then I'm going to bring it back, but the whole time I want the front coming back to me. So if you look at my hand, what will happen is I'll dip in, and then it'll come back, and dip in and come back. So that's what's going to keep me up in the circle wheelie, because the natural motion of the bike is to fall over on the side. It wants to fall down. So the weight coming down, you got to compensate by using a little bit of gas, or if your idle's turned up, just let off the brake a little bit. But it's going to look a lot like this. I'm cruising. I'm doing probably walking speed. The bike's at a set speed. I dip it in. Once the bike's dipped in, I bring it up, and it's going to be this motion throughout the whole circle wheelie right here. Notice how the bike's swiveling underneath me. It's a lot of leg motion. I use my legs quite a bit in the circle wheelie.
All right, we're going to turn the bike in. The front's going to drop a little bit. We're going to bring the front back up while pivoting the bike back center line underneath us. This is going to be the fundamental of the circle wheelie. All right, we're going to turn it in. Front's going to drop a little bit. We're going to bring it back up, pivot the bike underneath us, get it settled. Turn it in. Front's going to drop a little bit. We're going to accelerate it up, pivot underneath us. Turn it in, bring it up, pivot underneath. This process, repeated over and over again, is how we do our circle wheelies. This is going to sound a little bit complicated, but bear with me. We don't do circle wheelies by linking whole circles together, but by linking a bunch of quarter turns together. A lot of quarter turns linked together turn into circles. The better we get, our quarter turns turn more into a bunch of 8 turns, and to a spectator look like smooth circles. We're going to ride the circle wheelie with our bodies perpendicular to the ground as possible while still remaining in line with the bike. We're going to be leaning just a little bit, but not enough to cause us to fall in or out. Leaning too far in causes the bike to fall into the turn. Leaning too far out creates too much centrifugal force in the body and will either throw you off or high side the bike. There's always going to be instances where we aren't always in perfect position doing our circle wheelies, but the key to doing many circles in a row requires us to get back into a perfect position as quickly as possible, whether it's by using less gas, less brake, more brake, or by manipulating our body or the bike itself. Like I said before, never we just turning the bike in and going along for the ride. You'll never see us just dip the bike in and hang on and hope for the best. A circle wheelie is so much more than a circle wheelie. It's the absolute epitome of control on a machine. Just like the basis of the 12 o'clock wheelie and going slow, we're constantly making adjustments. We're constantly moving our bike, our body, getting it back in position underneath us, doing some pivoting, body manipulation here and there. That is the basis of going slow in a 12 o'clock. That same concept is applied to doing circle wheelies. We're constantly moving around on our bike. Every now and then we'll get in a situation where we just turn it in and something seems to happen and we'll get lucky and cruise around in a 360-degree turn, but that doesn't happen very often. Even the smoothest people out there, the best guys out there doing circle wheelies, are constantly making adjustments on their bike. That's why you absolutely need to know how to pivot the bike back underneath you, get it back into position, and being able to control the height of the bike using just minor throttle input and brake input.